public schools, and all the things that are considered hot button issues, statistics will bear out across the board that the vast majority of Americans share the same perception of them. That is, we would like common sense gun safety legislation. We would like the right to reproductive rights. We like our public schools. We like the things that have in the past made up the liberal consensus that we lived under between 1933, when FDR ushered it in, until the present, when it is now under attack from the MAGA Republicans. So it's important to remember that there are a lot more of us than there are of them, but we need to turn people out to vote. We need to turn people out to vote at every level in this election, because this election is going to be won by turnout. And it's going to be enormously important for this election not to be challenged. That is, for the numbers to be so large that the MAGA Republicans cannot argue that there's any confusion about what happens. So I'm so thrilled people are turning out to volunteer. I also want to emphasize that in this moment, and honestly, this is to me, in a way, the more important one. I'm an older woman. I've watched the world for a long time. And I know a lot of people are scared right now because there's so much horrible stuff going on, especially in Republican-dominated states where people are losing their rights and their freedoms. And that's terrifying, terrifying even if you don't live in one of those states. But I would like to emphasize that when you look at an era like the 1890s or the 1930s, for example, a time in which the order of the country is changing. That is, the old guard is falling away and the new vision of the country is rising. It's a time not only of fear, but also of extraordinary creation, of creativity, of people coming up with new music and new art and new ways of looking at the world and new combinations and new politics and new economics. And you see that all around you too. And I find it an enormously empowering moment to think that rather than just simply fighting a holding action, as I've done for the last 40 years, we're actually creating something. And that joy, that idea that, maybe it's not so much fun to stuff envelopes or to make phone calls or to show up at Zoom meetings or to knock on doors or to do any of the things we have to do to get the turnout that we need in this election, that we're building something. And we're building something that puts us in line with the greatest moments in our history. We are on the side of Fannie Lou Hamer and Booker T. Washington and Ida B. Wells and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. You'll notice I didn't put Jefferson in there. We've got behind us those phenomenal principles that everybody has a right to be treated equally before the law, and everybody has a right to a say in their government. Those are principles that even in the 21st century, most people in the world don't live under. And the fact that we get to do that, we get to protect that. This is our moment to stand up and be counted as to what we think the ultimate goal of humanity is, the idea of self-determination and the right to determine the rules under which we live. That's exciting. As well as being in a frustrating and a frightening time, we are also in a time of extraordinary privilege because we get to make a difference, not only for ourselves and our towns and even our country, but also for the world. And that honestly is what keeps me going. And I think that that is a good way to think about what we're trying to do here. I'd also like to point out when you're starting to volunteer, one of the things that they talk about people said in 1930s Germany when they didn't speak up, when they didn't stop what was happening is, well, what can I do? I'm only one person. And the answer to that is make a friend. And then once you two have met, make another friend. And pretty soon you've got a whole group of people who can do things like show up at school committee meetings or town council meetings, or can say, hey, wait a minute, what happened with that contract? And that's how you change things